The state trooper told us to follow him. We were 3 young women, all stationed at the same Air Force base, and as far as we knew, we'd only been pulled over for speeding. But instead of writing us a ticket, he led us miles away from the highway, down an isolated dirt road surrounded by cornfields. Then we saw the men waiting for us. They were standing outside an old barn, and every one of them was carrying a shotgun. For the next few minutes, we genuinely believed we weren't going to make it home. And the worst part is, the only reason we were allowed to leave may have been the military ID sitting inside that police officer's hand. My name is Tracy. At the time this happened, I was in my early 20s and stationed with the U.S. Air Force near Omaha, Nebraska. I had a roommate named Tracy, and one of our closest friends was a girl named Stacy. The 3 of us were young, reckless, and probably much more confident than we should have been. Our names were so similar that people constantly mixed us up. Whenever we were together, somebody would inevitably ask us if we were joking when we introduced ourselves. And because we were young, we'd usually make the confusion worse on purpose. Those were good years. We were laughing all the time. We had very little money, but we didn't care. We had friends, freedom, and enough time to believe that nothing truly bad could happen to us. One weekend, the 3 of us decided to take a road trip to Kansas City. There wasn't really a serious plan. We just wanted to get away from the base for a couple of days. Stacy drove because she had the car, and she also had something of a reputation for driving faster than she should. The 3 of us were singing along to music, yelling over each other, and laughing so loudly that I doubt any of us noticed how fast we were actually going. Then we saw the lights. A state trooper was behind us. The flashing lights came on. Stacy immediately slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder. She rolled down the window and already had her license and registration in her hand. We weren't particularly worried. We assumed she'd get a speeding ticket. Maybe a warning, nothing more. The officer approached the driver's side. He looked at Stacy, then he looked at me, then Tracy. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. Then he said something that immediately confused all 3 of us. "I want you to follow me." Stacy blinked. The officer continued, "Don't try to run off. If you do, you'll all be going to jail." Then he walked back to his cruiser. For several seconds, none of us spoke. Finally, Stacy said, "What just happened?" We had no idea. He hadn't asked for her license. He hadn't mentioned how fast she'd been going. He hadn't even told her what she'd supposedly done wrong. Still, he was a police officer, and we were young, so we followed. He pulled back onto the highway and drove for several miles. We expected him to stop at another location. Maybe there was a police station nearby. Maybe he was taking us somewhere to sort out a citation. Then he suddenly exited the highway. The road became smaller, then narrower. Eventually, the pavement disappeared completely. We were driving along a dirt road. Tall cornfields surrounded us on both sides. The joking stopped. The music went off. Nobody was singing anymore. I remember looking at Tracy and seeing the same question in her face that I was feeling. Where were we going? Stacy kept both hands tightly on the steering wheel. The police cruiser continued ahead of us. The farther we drove, the more isolated everything became. No houses, no businesses, no other vehicles, just fields. Then the officer turned onto another dirt road. A few minutes later, we saw an old barn. It looked abandoned, weather-beaten wood, broken-looking windows, no signs, no explanation for why a police officer would bring 3 speeding motorists there. Then several men stepped out. They were carrying shotguns. I remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. Until then, some part of me had still believed there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe this was a hunting area. Maybe the officer was taking us somewhere for some official reason. But seeing those men standing there with guns destroyed every comforting explanation my mind had been building. We had driven away from the highway. We were alone, and there were armed strangers waiting for us. Stacy stopped the car. The officer got out. Then he walked back toward us. He told Stacy to get out and follow him to his cruiser. I looked at her. Her face had completely changed. The playful girl who had been laughing and singing 20 minutes earlier was gone. She looked terrified. She opened the door. The officer walked her toward his vehicle. He motioned for her to get into the passenger seat. She did, Tracy and I stayed in the car. The armed men stood nearby. They weren't saying anything. They were just watching us. I remember thinking that if anything happened, nobody would hear us. We didn't know where we were. We didn't know how far we'd been taken from the highway, and nobody knew exactly where we'd gone. That's when the fear became real. Tracy and I started crying. Neither of us wanted to make a scene. We just sat there holding each other's hands and quietly praying. I remember thinking about my family. I remember wondering if we'd ever see them again, and I remember feeling completely helpless. We couldn't overpower anyone. We couldn't outrun anyone, and the person who had taken us there was wearing a police uniform. After several minutes, the driver's door of the cruiser suddenly opened. Stacy came running toward us. She threw open the car door and climbed into the driver's seat. She was sobbing so hard she could barely speak. Seeing her like that made Tracy and me panic even more. The officer got out, but instead of returning to Stacy, he walked toward the passenger window where Tracy was sitting. He leaned down. Then he asked, "Is it true all of you are in the Air Force?" Tracy nodded. "Yes, sir." There was a pause. The officer looked at all three of us. Then he said, "Get out of here." We stared at him. He continued, "Go back where you came from, and I better not see you again." That was it. No explanation, no ticket, no apology, just a warning. Stacy started the car. She turned it around on the dirt road so quickly that the tires kicked up dust. None of us said a word. We drove. She followed the road back the way we'd come, somehow finding the highway again. For several minutes, the only sounds inside the car were our breathing and occasional sobs. Eventually, we crossed back into Nebraska. That's when Stacy pulled onto the shoulder. She put the car in park and completely broke down. Tracy and I hugged her. We kept asking the same question. "Are you okay?" She nodded. She wasn't physically hurt, but whatever had happened inside that police car had terrified her. When she could finally speak, she told us. After getting into the cruiser, she had handed the officer her identification and apologized for speeding. Instead of writing her a ticket, he began asking questions about me and Tracy. Then, he made hateful comments about us and asked Stacy what she was doing with us. She told him we were friends. He then suggested that she could do certain things for him in exchange for letting all three of us leave with a warning. That's when she panicked. She started crying and refused. While he was waiting for her to calm down, he looked more closely at her identification. That's when he noticed her military ID. He asked where we were stationed. She told him, Offutt Air Force Base. He asked whether all three of us were military. She said yes. And suddenly, his entire attitude changed. He told her to get back into the car. That was why he had finally let us go. We sat there on the side of that highway in silence, and eventually the realization hit all three of us at the same time. Whatever had been happening back there, the military connection may have been the thing that saved us. We had been thinking about our trip, about speeding, about getting a ticket. We had never considered that the person pulling us over might be the person we needed protection from. That was the part that stayed with me. We never reported what happened. Looking back, I know that sounds unbelievable, but we were young, we were scared, and we were convinced that nobody would believe three young women over a uniformed state trooper. We worried that we'd somehow be blamed. We worried that reporting him would make things worse. So, we went back to the base. We never took that road trip again. We never talked about the incident with anyone outside our small group. And eventually, life moved on. But I still think about that dirt road. I think about the moment the highway disappeared behind us. I think about the cornfields, the old barn, the men holding shotguns, and Stacy walking toward that police cruiser while looking at us like she was saying goodbye without actually saying it. I've replayed that day in my head more times than I can count, and there's one question I still can't answer. What would have happened if that officer had never noticed the military ID? I don't know. None of us do. Maybe he would have eventually let us go. Maybe nothing worse would have happened. Or maybe that little plastic card was the only thing that changed the situation. Because sometimes you don't realize you're in danger when it begins. You think you're being stopped for speeding. You think you're following a police officer, because that's what you're supposed to do. And then somewhere along the way, you look out the window and realize you've been taken somewhere you were never supposed to be. We were lucky. That's the only word I can use. Lucky that the officer saw those IDs. Lucky that he changed his mind. And lucky that we got back on to that highway together. If you enjoyed tonight's story, let me know by leaving a like. And if you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, share your story in the comments below. Your experience could be featured in a future episode of The Dark Chronicles. If you're new here, subscribe and join us for new true horror stories every Thursday and Sunday. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious. See you in the dark.